Hey, big labor, as expected, has found a pliant ally in Joe Biden and his administration. They spent enough buying Biden's election. Want some money on that, want some return on that investment. Mark Mix, president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation, joins us now as we talk about the big prizes Joe Biden has tried to deliver, big labor. Hello, sir. It's been a long time since we rock and rolled. How are you?
I'm doing great, Matt. It's good to hear your voice, and, a little Tennessee Ernie was a good start to this whole thing, and it's a good lead-in to what, Joe Biden's trying to do to the federal government, making it a company store. And I'll tell you what, big labor has benefited dramatically from that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I'm thinking about all kinds of different areas. Remember, this is the president, Mark, who as a candidate said, I believe he was a candidate at the time, he said he would promised to be the most pro-union president you've ever seen. Has he delivered on that promise?
Well, what you have to do is you have to decipher what he means when he says most pro-union president, because you have to say, you have to add and inject the word forced unionism president, because if you're a rank-and-file union member who was an operating engineer working on the Keystone Pipeline, you're on the unemployment line thanks to the most pro-union president in the United States or in United States history. If you're an oil and gas worker doing energy exploration on federal lands, you're on the unemployment line thanks to the most pro-union president in American history, allegedly. So, what we need to do is recognize that he hasn't paid off the rank and file. Who's he paid off are the top union bosses back here in Washington. And to your point, Matt, those are the ones that invested literally hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to get him elected.
That's exactly right. It seems to me his administration has used the National Labor Relations Board as the cudgel, as the political weapon that his Department of Justice has done, when it comes to other things like harassing and intimidating parents who don't agree with school board policies. Has that pretty much played out over the last 11 plus months?
Yeah, it absolutely has, Matt. If in the first 23 minutes of this administration, Joe Biden did something that no president has done since the National Labor Relations Act was passed in 1935, and that's fire an independent agency's general counsel. This independent counsel that was nominated by Trump and confirmed was basically had 11 months left on their term. This general counsel had been thinking about employee rights vis-a-vis big business and big labor rights, and said that there's another piece of that equation. It's called employees. And Joe Biden and his handlers in the White House couldn't take that anymore, and the big labor bosses said, you got to get rid of this guy, so he did it. And they hired this new general counsel, Jennifer Abruzzo, who's a former union official, general counsel for the Communication Workers of America, and the changes of the National Labor Relations Board have been dramatic. In fact, one of the things that just happened, Matt, is the Amazon situation. Amazon has basically completely capitulated to pressure from the NLRB based on that Bessemer, Alabama election down there where there were 5,300 workers eligible to vote, and only 17%, Matt, of the workers in that bargaining unit voted for unionization. But the NLRB threw out the election, demanded a new election, which is ongoing right now, and put Amazon in a very difficult place. And, I don't give any sympathy to Amazon for capitulating and, making some kind of national agreement for their workers when the workers are the ones that should have the choice. It shouldn't be, no one should have their thumb on the scale one way or the other when a worker decides to join a union or not.
No, I think that you just described the Biden administration, the thumb on the scale, repeatedly. That's what we've seen over and over again. Mark Mix joining us this hour on the Vicki McKenna Show, talking about big labor. Mark, of course, president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. They have done great work defending the right to work, is exactly as it says, for many, many years. Speaking of the right to work, how much in peril is that right to work, the freedom from compulsory union dues, union membership under the Biden administration?
Well, if you look at it on a state-by-state basis, you're not very in danger. But if you look at it from the federal perspective, this president has basically promised that he will sign a bill that's already passed the House of Representatives with no testimony, no committee hearings, just simply rammed through back in March, that repeals all 27 right-to-work laws, including Wisconsin's. I mean, by federal fiat, they will simply say, the union officials can have you fired if you don't pay dues or fees to get or keep a job.
But they haven't got that through the Senate yet, am I correct?
That is correct. Although it's not for lack of trying, Chuck Schumer has indicated that he wants to bring that bill to the floor at some point, and they're trying to take pieces of the so-called PRO Act, that bill that initially, and first off would repeal right to work clause, but has other major provisions that give union officials dramatically more power over workers, and they're trying to basically shoehorn that into the so-called reconciliation bill. It got shoehorned into the so-called infrastructure bill that was less about infrastructure and more about political power and empowering union officials to give them more power over workers and construction projects and things that are happening in the states. I mean, you can't deny this when you look at the language of the so-called reconciliation bill, and they're going to give an above-the-line tax credit for union members that pay union dues. They're going to give a tax credit, above-line tax credit, for someone who buys an electric vehicle from a union-made company. So you and I are going to be paying union dues and paying the benefit for, quote, union electric vehicles as taxpayers that give a benefit to union-only construction, like Davis-Bacon laws and things like that are all part and parcel of Biden trying to buy off these big labor bosses.
Now, this is just a hunch, but I have the feeling the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation has been busier than ever over the last 11-plus months. Am I correct in saying?
Yeah, indeed. I just got a report from our legal director. We have a board meeting the end of next week, and we have 148 active cases right now in the last quarter. Just the last 4 months, we have 148 active cases at various levels of the court: U.S. Supreme Court, National Labor Relations Board, federal courts of appeals, federal district courts, state courts. There's a lot going on, and a lot of workers are really stepping up. And Matt, it takes a lot of courage to stand up in the workplace and say, I want to exercise my rights. And when people do that, there has to be someone that can defend them. And the Right to Work Foundation has been doing that since 1968, and we'll continue to do it. And it's been a very rewarding experience. And we've gone to the U.S. Supreme Court 18 times on behalf of workers, and we provide all that legal service for free to workers who want to exercise their rights in the workplace.
That's absolutely right. We'll give a little information before we say goodbye to Mark Mix joining us on the Vicki McKenna Show. I want to just give you a little taste of this. It's a piece that was written by Liz Peek at The Hill. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but the headline is Joe Biden's Big Labor Push Not Winning Voters. And I guess ultimately what the column is about, and what we've been talking about, is Joe Biden richly paying back his sugar daddies in big labor with the nation's unions. But will it cost him dearly? Has it cost him dearly, politically speaking, and will it cost him in the 2022 midterm elections?
Yeah, Matt, I think it will. And we have a case study here in Virginia in the recently completed statewide elections here. It was Terry McAuliffe, former governor running again for a second term, said that he would sign the repeal of the right to work law if the legislature could put it on his desk. That was a change in his position from the first time he ran back in 2013, and said, we have a great right to work law in Virginia. We like it because it protects workers' rights and it gives us an economic advantage over other states. Those are his words, not mine. And then in this last election, he says, I'd sign it if they put it on my desk. And then the other part of that equation is we got to see the raw power of the teachers union. And I know in Wisconsin, you guys are well versed in the power of WEAC and the others up there, but the rest of the nation got to see it, and we got to see it here in Virginia. And when parents stood up against and fought back against school boards, they realized that the National Education Association, the American Federation of Teachers, and their state affiliates, these are the power brokers that basically control the schools. And that particular exercise in seeing and visualizing the power of the monopoly power of the unions in how they exercise their power and how they throw it around politically was another example of that type of agenda being rejected, by parents, by moms. I mean, they made the moms mad, and when you make mom mad, holy mackerel.
Man, let me tell you something. And that's what we learned, of course, in 2011, 2012, those battles on the front lines with Act 10 here in Wisconsin, national, the right to work law that the governor signed here, Governor Scott Walker at the time in 2015. And what we heard, Mark, is what you hear all over the land. I'm sure wherever you go, Virginia, Wisconsin, whatever state you're in, and that is, oh boy, if you cut the power of the labor unions, the teachers unions, we're just going to dry up. There will be no resources. We'll be broke. They cry poverty all the time. Yet here they are, richly funding, among the biggest funders of Governor Tony Evers, for instance, or Joe Biden at the national level. You think Americans are tired? They've gotten, they're done with the whole cries of poverty from these labor unions?
Well, I think so. And if you just basically scratch the surface of some of the other things that are happening at the administrative level, the executive branch level, for example, pension bailouts. Union officials have made these promises to private sector and public sector workers across the nation about, these great pensions. Well, it turns out, Matt, no surprise to you, that most of these pensions are teetering on the edge of insolvency. In fact, the Teamsters pension fund, the Central State Pension Fund, which unfortunately has more retired members than active members, and it has, fewer and fewer employers who are contributing to it because they can't afford to anymore. I mean, they just got about a $91 billion bailout, so you and I and the taxpayers of the United States are going to basically pay all the benefits and administrative costs for these critically funded pensions from now until 2051. I mean, Jeez. That actually passed. And so, while they may not be able to attract workers to join them voluntarily, they certainly can use their political power, albeit in Wisconsin or in Washington, D.C., to get the taxpayers to float the bill and pay the bill for all of the largesse that occurs in the union movement.
You bet. They're not taking any hurt, that's for sure. Mark Mix, president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. Final question for you. How can our listeners, if they feel like their right to work is threatened at their jobs, how can they contact you?
Well, they can find us on that amazing internet at www.nrtw.org, nrtw.org, and they can get lots of answers to questions. They can talk to an attorney for free. There's an 800 number there. They can find us on, Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff at Right to Work. So, Matt, thanks for the opportunity to talk with you today.
Thank you. You're a great American, and you, my friend, are just like so many in our listening audience. We don't owe our soul to the government company store.
That's right, Matt. Thanks. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you, too. Mark Mix joining us on the Vicki McKenna Show today, president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation.